Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise to adjourn in memory of former Los Angeles City Councilman and Assemblymember Richard Alatorre. I first met Councilman Richard Alatorre when he was a special guest at one of my husband's fundraisers. After his 30-second introduction, I noticed Richard leaning against a wall. He was fidgeting and shifting his weight during my husband's 10-minute remarks. Afterwards, Richard came over to Chuck and somewhat affectionately said, "Hey man, did you have to give the Gettysburg Address? I gotta go." And he turned around and left. So that was my first introduction to the vato of the Assembly, Richard Alatorre. Richard was a man of few words. He had little patience for politicians who spoke too much, and particularly for those that spoke more about themselves. You see, Richard only spoke when he had something to say, and those around listened. So when you see Irvine ask for more money to build a medical center, Alatorre was then the chair of the Budget Subcommittee. But he made his support contingent on them opening health clinics in Santa Ana and setting aside 25% of their enrollment for Black and Latino students. He told them, "When you're ready to do that, come back and see me." Richard was also my husband's mentor, and it was not an easy task being his protege. On the first day of session, Freshman Calderon went to Richard's office to ask for advice on how to be a good member. Richard had his feet up on the desk, which he was notorious for doing. And he looked at him, matter-of-factly, and he said, "Just sit down and shut the bleep up." After several seconds of silence, Chuck said, "Is that it?" He said, "Yep." A year later, Chuck finally had the courage to speak on the floor for the first time, and it was a bill he hated that had passed. So after he moved for reconsideration, the author brought the bill up again, and Chuck spoke against it. When he sat down, Richard was sitting in his seatmate's chair. Richard said, "Good speech. Do you think you moved anybody?" And Chuck said, "Yeah, I did my research. I spoke passionately. I think I may have moved some people." Well, of course, the bill got out with more votes than it did the first time. And Richard turned to Chuck and said, "Sit down and shut the bleep up." Richard was direct and unapologetic for those people he fought for. As the chair of the Elections and Reapportionment Committee, he created more districts for Latinos to run in. And whether dealing with the higher echelons of law enforcement, academia, or political office, his sense of purpose never wavered. He understood why he was in office and was never intimidated by power. Instead, he harnessed that power and wielded it to create equal opportunity and justice for others. Richard will never be forgotten by the people he helped, those that had a chance to run for public office, and those he served with. He was one of a kind, a force of nature. We will miss him. Members, I respectfully ask that we adjourn in the memory of Richard Alatorre.